Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 140 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. Now, in today's episode, Leslie and I are talking about decluttering tools. Leslie, I have nightmares about garages full of stuff and sheds full of stuff with like these overflowing toolboxes. That's the vision I get when I hear decluttering tools. But I kind of like it, although it's not really my realm of things I'm responsible for. I kind of like doing it. It doesn't bother me.
No, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? When you see a garage looming, and that's getting down to the real nitty gritty, isn't it? Getting down to the finer details. So it's something that you'll probably leave until the end of your garage declutter, isn't it? And then you would home in on the actual toolbox, or it depends really how many tools you've got and how many boxes you've got. And I'm talking about just one toolbox. There can be multiple, but it's a rarity, to be fair, for us as professional organisers to be let loose on tools, isn't it? Because quite often there is someone in the house who really likes the tools and doesn't want those to be fiddled around with by some external person coming in. And so I've done my own tools. I have decluttered tools for clients. And it kind of depends. As you said, not my favourite thing to do, but you can make a real impact with it.
Yeah. Well, I can assure you of one thing, listeners. I have multiple toolboxes in this house. There's a whole kitchen cupboard that is dedicated to tools of stuff that can't be out in the garage. There's lots of stuff. My husband is quite a handy DIYer, I must admit. So lots and lots of tools in this house. So in this house, I'm not really responsible for those kind of items. That's kind of the one thing I don't touch. But at my clients' houses, I definitely come across them at some point. And normally clients are like, oh no, I don't want to do this. But I'm like, it's so satisfying. But I think the problem is that decluttering tools can be quite a tricky one because we are not really sure what it is, what we need to keep, what we need to do with them. So we're also going to talk a little bit about donation in this podcast, aren't we, Leslie?
Yeah, we definitely are. We'll talk about donation later. I mean, I think that one of the things that I wanted to talk about really is the fact that if you've got a really messy, disorganized toolbox, it can be a barrier to getting projects done, can't it? And so it is important to be able to put your hand quickly on what you need. And in order to do that, then you need to organize your toolbox effectively. So you need a decent toolbox with categories within it, or you need several toolboxes with tools categorized into each box. It depends. You know, Ingrid's husband is a big DIYer, so they've got a lot of tools in their house. We don't have loads of tools in this house, but we still have enough. Do you know what I mean? We have enough for what we need. But to be fair, we've probably got too many for what we need because we tend to get people in to do things. And so if you get people in to do things, which I invariably do because we're not very handy in that many things that we can do, but DIY is something that I choose not to do, and I'd rather get somebody in. I've got my handy. I do project management, don't I? So I've got a joiner on tap, really, and so why would I do that myself when I've got my lovely Tarek to do it? So we don't really do many tools, but you still need a basic tool collection, don't you? Even if you're not an avid DIYer.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Leslie, because one of my clients actually had a couple of little tools. I mean, she lives in a flat, so she only needs like a screwdriver and a couple little bits, but she didn't have a toolbox. So we actually ended up ordering a tiny little toolbox for all of the things to go in together instead of them kind of living loose in different random places. And then when you need them, you can't find them. So if you don't have a toolbox, maybe this podcast will kind of make you think and go, I actually need to get a toolbox so I can put some stuff together. Or maybe you realize now already listening to us thinking, oh my goodness gracious, yes, we do have a lot of tools in this house. So we don't know whether we're coming or going. We don't know how much we have. We need to sort this out.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, really. Oh, hit the nail on the head. Who knew? Sorry. I just realised that I said that. How I'm on fire already, Ingrid. Oh, sorry, that's just I've made myself laugh with that. I don't know. I shouldn't be laughing at my own jokes, but anyway. So I think the key to toolboxes is containerization, isn't it? And that's what we're talking about. What we don't want is a random assortment of tools dotted around everywhere, because a lot of times they end up in our classic junk drawer, don't they? If they're inside the house, or they're randomly scattered around a garage or a shed or an understairs cupboard or a basement or a loft, wherever that might be. But we need to bring them together in an organized fashion. And so the volumes are going to be very different depending on how you operate in your house. So as Ingrid says, she's got loads and loads. I've not got many, but nevertheless, what we need to do is we need to bring those together so we know exactly what we need. And that's what we're going to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, I think we need to start at the beginning, Leslie. I mean, how many tools do people have that never even see the light of day? I think they get handed down through the generations as well. Somebody passes away somewhere, or somebody realizes I'm getting too old to do all this DIY, and kind of the whole shed full of its contents and all the tools kind of goes to the next person. And then we end up with like loads. I mean, how many screwdrivers and hammers and measuring tapes and nails and bolts, and how much do we really, really need?
I think the problem is sometimes, you're absolutely right there. We do get these things handed down. They almost look like antiques, don't they, sometimes? So, when you get these really old tools that have kind of been hand turned or whatever in the kind of 20s and 30s, they look sort of too good to get rid of. And that's where we struggle. And there's quite often there's that sentimental attachment to things, because that might be your dad or your granddad or your grandma. And I'm not trying to be sexist here, but mainly in the 20s and 30s, it might have been your granddad or dad that. No, maybe not your dad in the 30s, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So there tends to be some kind of sentimental attachment to these tools as well. So tools, like, who knew, once again, there are going to be emotional attachments to tools. It's like, it's something as simple as that, but we still have that kind of yearning and that, oh, I remember my granddad doing that in the shed, and he used to tinker around and have a lovely day. And so we don't want to get rid of them for that reason. And so it's hard, but what we need to do, as you rightly say, Ingrid, is we need to be realistic. So we need to look at our current lifestyle, and we talk about this all the time, and say, do I need this tool selection in my life, or am I being ridiculous? If you're like me and you get someone in to do 90% of the things, apart from maybe putting a picture up, then you don't need more than one simple toolbox. If you're like Ingrid's husband, who puts his hands to anything, then you're going to need a good selection. You're not going to get rid of things. So the first thing that we need to be is honest, because these are the kinds of things that we tend to keep forever and a day just because, aren't they, Ingrid?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I completely agree with you, because I think we actually have some tools in this house that belong to my grandfather, that belong to my husband's grandfather, but there are just a few, because everything gets upgraded now. We've got, power drills, and, everything needs to be plugged in, and it has rechargeable batteries. But even, when we buy a new drill, because the batteries from the old drill have run out, and you can't get, of course, that type of battery anymore 10 years down the line. You upgrade, but we kind of keep hanging on and kind of keep putting it away like, oh, yeah, it'll do at some point. It's like, but we've got an upgrade. It's like with kettles. We keep the old kettle and we've got a new one. It's the same with power tools and things like that. So the volumes, I think, really add up. And, how many screwdrivers do we need? We need to have a small one, a larger one, a cross one kind of a sturdy one, a tiny one. We don't need 45 different screwdriver sets unless you're a builder and you do this for a job. There is, I think, a balance between having some stuff so you can sort those DIY jobs out in your house, or, oh my word, I've got every toolkit under the sun and I only drill a couple of holes like once a year and I do a couple of small repairs. And I think that's where you can kind of really win on space.
Yeah, definitely. So first things first, realism. Take a realistic look at your life, what it looks like, what do you do in your house, who does what, and what do you need, and then try and pare it down to a minimum. Take out those sentimental things. If you do have a sentimental screwdriver or hammer from your granddad that's of sentimental value, bring it into the house, put it in a shadow box. You might not use it, but just something like that would be really cool and really cute to have on your wall in some kind of gallery wall or something. Use it. Don't just leave it languishing in a shed or a garage to get old and moldy. That's not what we want to do, because we want to look after these things. So sentimental things can be brought into the house and brought into, and displayed, things like that. I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about, Ingrid, was where are these tools and where's the best place to keep tools generally, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what we see is indeed tools scattered everywhere. So I think when you're listening to this podcast and think, yes, I do have a couple of in the living room and some in my, get them all together and put them in one place. You don't need to have every tool under the sun in your house. You need to have a screwdriver, an Allen key, a measuring tape, maybe some picture hanging stuff, a hammer and a radiator key. I mean, you can solve probably about 90% of small little DIY things when you got those couple of bits together, either in a tiny little toolbox or a drawer or somewhere in your understairs cupboard, in your utility room. Find a place where all of your little bits and bobs live. The rest of your tools probably live in a garage, in a shed, in your basement, and maybe even in your loft, but somewhere kind of where they can all be together. Now, I kind of mentioned in between kind of talking about it, that I have a cupboard in my kitchen where several tools live, because there's some power tools that my husband does not want to have out in the garage, so they live inside. I unfortunately don't have a utility room, so we decided that one of the kitchen cupboard was going to be kind of a DIY cupboard. So you have to be smart. Not everything can be put outside, but has to be kept indoors. So think about that when you decide where is this stuff going to live.
Yeah, I think you've almost got a kind of, so it might just be that you want those things to hand. So there might be some issue with putting them outside as well. Or you might just want a few things to hand and other things in your shed or garage or basement. Again, need to be realistic. So my basement is kind of part of my general house. Is it a big deal to me to walk down one set of stairs to get a tool when I need it? Do I actually need it in the kitchen? Yours is different, Ingrid, because you've got to go out in the cold to a garage, open the garage up, and there's barriers down. We talk about barriers all the time. There's no barrier to me at all to go down into my basement to get a tool. So for that reason, all my tools live downstairs. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just not a big deal. If I need something, I can walk down one flight of stairs and I can get it. But we have this kind of inbuilt need, I think, to feel like we should have a screwdriver in a kitchen drawer and a junk drawer, and that's not always the case. And so extend that realism to thinking about your space and thinking, how hard is it for me to actually get to those things? If there is a barrier, if you do have to go outside in the cold or the wet, or you have to pull a garage door open, or all those things, and we understand that those are barriers. Yes, it's sensible to have some stuff inside, but that may not be necessary. It may not be necessary for you to have an overflow tool storage at all. So you may be perfectly fine. If you live in a flat, for example, you may not have a bulk storage space at all. And so you might have to have everything in your flat or in your condo or whatever, mightn't you? So think about that. And it's all about this compromise, isn't it? Again, are we prepared to give valuable space up in our home to tools that we may or may not need?
Now, decluttering tools is not an easy job, isn't it? I mean, they're part of, like you said, they're part of a garage, they're part of a shed, they're part of like our bigger storage areas. It's a big job, isn't it, Leslie?
Yeah, these kind of what we like to call bulk storage areas are really difficult to declutter. We have a whole course, don't we, in our membership all about decluttering what we call bulk storage areas, so garages, lofts, basements, because it really does involve planning, logistics. You have to think about categorization really carefully. We have to think about labeling, zoning, all of those come into play. And the toolbox is an interesting one because that tends to be right at the end, as we've said. That's the fine tuning. Because if you suddenly start doing your toolbox at the in the first 10 minutes of doing your garage declutter, you'll never get any further, will you? So it definitely needs to almost be done as a separate project in some ways, if you're breaking it down.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And the interesting thing is, what I see a lot as well is that people do jobs inside the house and then the tools keep lingering inside. They never make it back to their original place. It's like, why are all these tools here? Oh yeah, we did a DIY project 3 months ago, but the tools are still here. We haven't gotten around to putting it back due to all the barriers. So that's also, I think, one of the jobs that you really then see is like, let's put that back to where it belongs. And then immediately you start to clear space and it starts to feel better. And yeah, then it really works, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. And the other interesting thing really about decluttering tools is that they get muddled up with lots of other things. So almost like household accessories, let's call them. So things like masking tape, things like little brackets that you have when you build a new IKEA unit that you decided that you didn't want to fix against the wall, but you still keep it just in case you ever do. And so we have all those kind of extra little things, again, quite often in a junk drawer or in a toolbox that we keep forever and a day. And by the time we get to them, we can't even remember what they were for or why we kept them. And so we have a lot of fiddly things in toolboxes as well, don't we? So they're not just big things, hammers and screwdrivers, because they're a bit more simple. We have lots of little things that we need to go through. So it's a big, dare I say it, laborious job.
It's not an easy one. It's the same as when you kind of dive into stationery, but and people have lots of stationery. It's also kind of like you need to do a lot of categorization and then kind of deciding what is all this stuff? What does it work for? What does it go with? Why do I need it? Or when you're doing, dare I say it, wires, like which equipment does this go with? Does it still work? What is it for? Why didn't I put a label on this bag when I got it?
Yeah, I think that's it. And then if we start getting down to things like nails and screws and all that, then we really, really are fine tuning as well. And those quite often just get thrown into a toolbox. But the interesting thing is for many people, when they do start a DIY project, the first thing they do is go out to the hardware store and buy a new set of screws or a new set of nails or whatever, and actually completely ignore the ones that they've already got. And so that's where containerization and organization and categorization can really help, because it can stop you from rebuying things, which is what we typically do when we absolutely don't need them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, listeners, there is good news in this whole story because you can actually donate your tools, can't you? So it's not like, oh, I'm going to do all this sorting and decluttering, but then what? Then what? You can donate your tools, but it just involves, you can't really bring it to a charity shop. It's not really an item that kind of, the first thing is not that you think, let me bring this to a charity shop. But there are lots of places who actually do want your tools. And yes, of course, you can use your local Freegal or FreeCycle, or you can check with your charity shops. But there are actually specialist places where you can donate your tools.
There are, and I know that you've done some Google searching this morning, haven't you, Ingrid? And you've come up with a great list of things that surprisingly can get donated.
Yes, so I actually found, honestly, I did a quick Google search, and the first I had 8 options. Half of them were in the US, half of them were here in the UK. So for example, here in the UK, there's Tools for Alliance, Tools with a Mission, Work Aid, men's sheds. I mean, apparently there's sheds where men hang out together and they kind of fix and build stuff. And they would love your tools. In the US, you've got Habitat for Humanity, Goodwill, the Salvation Army, the Vietnam Veterans of America. They all request tools. So then I had a little look and I went, okay, this is great. And I will put all of the links that I found in the show notes that you can find on our website. So you can have a look at that. But I think if you are maybe in Canada or Australia or anywhere else in the world, have a little Google donating tools in Canada. I'm sure something comes up. And they've got all overviews on those websites, what they need. And I kind of saw a common thread of items. So they all want just tools, your builder's tools, carpenter tools, electrician tools, motor mechanics, plumbing, garage workshop, power tools. A lot of them also wanted to have garden equipment, so shovels and spades and forks and those kinds of bits. Sewing and knitting was popular, so sewing machines, vintage or antique machines or manual machines, overlockers, and with knitting, electronic or manual equipment all really wanted, and wool and things like haberdashery. So I was surprised at how, I knew there was a need out there, but the detail that they put on the website of what they want and what they don't want is very clear. So if you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I have a tool project here, do just a tiny bit of research. It's not difficult to find out. And maybe you find out, okay, whatever it's I'm not close enough to it. Then you can always go, I'm going to try my local free cycles and Freegles and Oleos and all of those things and my local apps, because people definitely want these items. So if you can save them from going to the tip or the recycling center, I think it's really well worth a try. But it does involve a little bit of investigating.
Yeah, so I know you're going to add those into the show notes, aren't you, Ingrid? And you're going to find those at declutterhub.com/podcast/tools. So if you want to know more about what Ingrid has been talking about or what types of things you can donate in your neck of the woods, then have a look, and Ingrid will put some of these resources that she's found this morning on Google.
Yes, definitely, Leslie. So I think that's it for this episode, isn't it? I think we've shared with our listeners all that we kind of wanted to chat about this topic. Is there anything else, Leslie, or have we got it all covered?
No, I think we've got everything covered. I just wanted to reiterate that we do have, if anybody's like, yes, I totally want to declutter my garage, my shed, my loft, and I want to do my tools, then we do have a course for that in the membership. Our membership you can find at members.declutterhub.com, and that course is available to everybody who is a member. So do check that out if that's something that you think, yes, I'm totally going to do my garage, loft, basement, and tools.
Yes. Now that's it for this episode, listeners. Thank you for being here, and we hope you've enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. Now, if you want to have more handy tips and advice of Leslie and I, come and join our Facebook group, the Declutter Hub Community with Leslie and Ingrid. Every Tuesday at 4:00, we have a Facebook Live. What would Ingrid and Leslie say? So if you're looking for some more handy tips and advice, come and listen in and tune in to us chatting about a different topic each week. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with others, and you can find the sharing buttons in our show notes. If you don't want to miss our next weekly episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast, and it will come into your notifications each Friday. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.